So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look at quadratic expressions, right? And these quadratic expressions are going to be expressions for which basically you don't have x squared by itself, i.e. the a value is not equal to 1. So for example, you would have something like this, 3x squared plus 5x plus 2. And I want you to factor it, i.e. take this problem and turn it into intercept form for a parabola. But in order to do that, we have to understand how we're going to do this. Okay, so now let's go through this and work on learning how to simply factor equations. So let's go and take a look at this problem that I have set up for you here. You'll notice we say there's two types of methods. There's one where we do this thing where we split the middle term. Another word for splitting the middle term is called decomposition. Now, let's get on with the concept of decomposition, okay? How do we do this? How do we apply it? All right, so let's take a look at this problem here. When you hear the term factoring, I told you that we're actually taking this problem and putting it into something that looks like intercept form, which is literally just two sets of brackets side by side multiplied together to give you a binomial, which is what we had practiced in the previous few lessons. So now, let's go over this problem that we have here, okay? Now, when you take a look at this problem, it says factor x squared plus 8x plus 3. Now, the key of this problem is always going to is when you're always looking at the middle term, okay? And remember when we were doing our multiplications, it was always the middle term that was always giving us the big problem. Now, what we're going to do is we're literally going to go backwards from the expansions that we did into our bracketed form. And in order to do that, we have to decompose or split the middle term. Now, when we look at this middle term, right? The middle term is a composition of the middle of the two outer terms, right? Now here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually draw a red line over the 4 and the 3. And what we're looking for is a number that times's to 12, but then adds to the middle term of 8. Now, I need two numbers that multiply to 12. So let's go and organize them from largest to smallest. Let's start with 1. Let's start with 12 and 1. 12 and 1 multiplied together is 12. But 12 plus 1 is 13, which means we can't use this. Now let's do that again for another pair of numbers that multiply to 12. How about 6 and 2? 6 and 2 multiply to 12, but then add to 8. Yes, perfect. We're good. We can use that. So we're going to use this to split the middle term to get our next thing. So here's what our next line when we're factoring is. So we take 4x squared plus 8x and we write 4x squared. And then we split the middle term into plus 6x plus 2x. So this 8x turns into these two parts, and then we rewrite the end of our equation. The next thing that we need to do is we need to literally take the equation and split it in two. And what we're literally going to do is we're going to have a bracket here, a plus, and a bracket here. Okay, and what goes into the first bracket is everything for the first half of the equation. So you're going to have the following: 4x squared and then plus 6x. And now for the second half, we're going to have plus 2x and then plus 3. Now, we can leave it like that, and then what we do is we look to see if anything in the first bracket can be divided out. Now, in the first bracket, you'll notice that both of these terms, 6x and 2x, can both have an x in it. So I tend to kind of write underneath it x. Now, for both of them. Now, also, the 4 and the 6, if you look at the 4 and the 6, both the 4 and the 6 can both be divided by 2. So now we divide both of them by 2. Now, let's go and take a look at the second bracket. Is there any variables that the 2x and the 3 have? There's nothing, there's no variables that both of them have, right? And there's no nice number that divides both the 3 and the 2 other than 1. So what we can do is we can take that equation that we have on that second line and imagine that we take 2x off of the 4x squared and the 1 out of the second part. Okay, so now what you're going to have is, well, 4x divided by 4 divided by 2 is going to be 2, and then x squared divided by x is x plus 3. So it's kind of like you're looking for a number that divides both the x squared and the 4 and the 6 and the x, and that's how we got the 2x that pulled out. And now for the second half we just pulled out positive 1, so we're left with the following: 2x plus 3. And wait a second, there's something that is very, very peculiar about this problem. Oh, wait a second, both of those 2 halves of the equation, this half and this half, both share a 2x plus 3. So what we can do is we can imagine that we pull it out to the front of our bracketed set because it's kind of like a common factor. So we got 2x plus 3, and then what's left over is what sits in front of each of these terms. So we got 2x and 1. So we're left with 2x plus 1. And now, exactly what did we do? If you take a look at each one of these brackets here that are up on the second line, you'll notice that the greatest common factor between 4x squared and 6x was 2x. And all we did was we took the GCF out of each of those brackets after we decomposed the middle term above. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to split the front half and the back half of our equation here, right? So it allowed us to split it in half. And then once we split it in half, we could pull out the greatest common factor, and that's what we have here. And then when we have those two common factors, we end up with bracketed factors for each multiplicative part, which is underlined in green here and in green here. And we can pull that out to the front just like pulling out a greatest common factor. And then whatever's left over goes into the end bracket. So let's try that again. Okay. Now, let us move on to this problem. Let's try it one more time. So now, for this problem, we're going to look at this equation here. We've got 4x squared minus 13x minus 12. So remember what we did before at the very beginning. We started by identifying the two numbers, the front and the back number, need to be multiplied. So we need to multiply two numbers that multiply to, well, negative 48, because 4 times negative 12 is negative 48, but then add to the middle number of negative 13. And we sit here and we do the mathematics, and I'll help you with this. So you get negative 16 and 3. So negative 16 and 3 work. So let's go and split that middle term. So we write now 4x squared, and we split the middle term to be minus 16x and plus 3x, and then minus 12. So now let's move on to the second half. So the next part that we have to do is we have to take the front half of our equation, put it into a bracket, and add to the end half of the equation. So we're going to have 4x squared minus 16x, and then we've got plus 3x and minus 12. So now let's go and take a look at the first bracket here. The first thing that both of them have is a 2x, right? The first thing that they both share is an x, so we can kill off the x on the first part, right? And then we look at 16 and 4, and we're looking for a number that divides out 16 and 4. So that's the biggest number is 4. So the greatest common factor between those two things is 4x. Now let's do the same for the second bracket. So for the second bracket, we take a look and we look for something that's shared between them. There is no x that's shared between them, but they both can be divided by positive 3. All right, so when we pull off positive 3 from both of these, you're going to get something. So let's see what we have on our next line. So we're going to get, in front of our equation, we're going to get 4x. And then in our brackets, that's left over. So you go 4 divided by 4 is 1. So that's just nothing. And then x squared divided by x is x. Oh. And then 16 divided by 4, negative 16 divided by 4 is negative 4. And x divided by x is nothing. So you got x minus 4 plus whatever's left over in the other half. Now, let's go here. So we are going to pull off from our bracket positive 3. All right. And since we pulled that out, what we're left with is, well, 3 divided by 3 is 1, and then x. Okay, so nothing's left there, so all we have is x, and then minus 4. And now that we've got that, we're like almost done. So now we look at each of these bracketed parts here, and we look for the commonality between them. The common factor, the commonality between them is x minus 4. So let us pull that out to the front here. So we've got x minus 4, and then in the brackets, whatever is left over is going into the last bracket. So we're left with 4x plus 3, and we're done factoring. Now, what you can do, all you have to do is just follow these basic steps. Take a look if there's a GCF and pull it out. We split the middle term, okay? And then we look for a multiply term for the end, right? So that's what we were doing up there. So now, what I want you to do, go and take a look at the other method that I've got, which allows us to factor some interesting equations, and then choose which one you want, and do the problems that I give you.